So what's up everyone, and welcome to another Warframe video. So the reason I have Excalibur here bouncing around like crazy despite the fact that there are no enemies in this room is because this episode is all about parkouring. And why is parkouring important to a game that's supposed to be a third-person shooter? Well, that's because Warframe is quite unique amongst all the third-person shooters in that it's kind of a hybrid between many of the parkour games and third-person shooter games. And in fact, compared to many parkour games that are out there, Warframe actually gives even greater maneuverability than many of the dedicated parkour games that are available. And so this movement capability becomes very important to the gameplay of Warframe, and so I thought I would go over some of the basics with regards to parkouring so that new players will at least get some understanding of movement mechanics so that they become more mobile in the game. Now, right from the start, I have to say that I am not a parkour expert, and there are a lot of other players who are much better than I am in maneuvering around these areas. However, I have played the game long enough that I do know some of the basics with regards to parkouring, so I hope this video will help with many of the new players who are trying to figure out just why a lot of these other players are able to move so fast, and why they are jumping around so much instead of just running, as you would typically see in many third-person shooter games. Now, since this is a beginner's guide, most of the movements in here are relatively basic, and for anybody who's played Warframe for a bit of time will find all of these movements relatively known. And so this really is a guide for beginners, and for any of the veteran players out here, you probably won't find this video to be all that useful. Okay, so for many players who start out playing this game, parkouring may look like it's one of those unnecessary extra acts of just showing off, and may wonder why people just continuously fly around a lot when they could just easily run to the same locations. And parkouring actually does give a lot of advantages. The first one, which is the most clear, is that you could cover distances a lot faster than you can with ordinary running. And so even if you take the fastest frame possible and run with it, parkouring with your slowest frame will actually go a lot faster. In addition to that, parkouring actually makes you a lot less of a target. So enemies will have a harder time shooting you when you're doing parkouring. Even a simple roll, for example, will make you a lot less prone to be hit than just straight out running. You could also get to locations that are unobtainable unless you do parkouring, such as crossing large chasms or jumping to very high ledges, which you wouldn't be able to do unless you learned how to parkour. Finally, parkour gets you out of a lot of trouble. If you get stuck in certain areas, parkouring can get you out of there. If you're caught in locations where there's a lot of enemy, parkouring can get you out of a problem. And if you're jumping into or falling into a certain area, parkouring can basically help continue to keep you mobile without suddenly making you stop and become a greater target. So parkouring turns out to be a very useful tool that all of the players find out as they continue to play the game. So anyway, what I wanted to do is to make parkouring relatively straightforward to learn. And for that, let's start out with the very basics. So of course, just like with any other game, Warframe goes with the front, back, left and right sort of movement. So of course, if you're on a PC, then that would be the WASD keys. And of course, those are the basic keys that you will find in any of the games, and Warframe is no different than that. In addition to that, of course, there's the ability to run faster versus just walking or moving, and of course that's the usual shift button that you do if you are on a PC. Now of course I don't play on any other platform aside from PC, so I do not know what the counterpart buttons are, but every game has those buttons, and it's probably important to get to learn which buttons they are for all of these. Now in addition to that, of course, there's the jumping, and in the PC that is the space button. So as you keep on pressing space, then of course your Warframe will jump. And so those are basically some of the basic movements that any game will provide to any player. Now, in addition to the movements that we already discussed, there are two other movements that combine to make the basic movements for Warframe. You may not see these in other games, but they are quite useful here. And the first one is slide, as you see here. And this is done, at least for the PC, by pressing Control while you're running. And I don't know what it is for the PS4 and the Xbox One, but this is again one of the basic movements, and it's actually one that is very useful. So I would suggest everybody to learn how to use this. You can use this to duck under many of the melee attacks that the enemies do, and also you can use this to get under many obstacles. And of course, as you can see here, you can use it to attack as well while you're sliding. So slide becomes one of the two additional basic movements that becomes really useful to know in the game. And the second movement that is equally useful is roll. And roll is done by actually tapping shift while you're running. So instead of pressing shift, which would actually slow you down and then speed you up, as you see here, if you just tap shift, then you actually will get the character to roll. And roll is one of those really useful get out of trouble sort of movements. So it will help you avoid getting hit by enemy fire, and it'll also often get you out of trouble when you're kind of getting stuck in some certain location. So now, yeah, with slide and roll, the next thing that would be good is to actually do the both in combination. So you could do a roll and then a slide, or here, as you can see, you could do a slide and a roll. And of course, when you're attacking while you're doing it, then you could actually start getting some pretty good movements with that. So even with the basic combination of keys, you could actually do some relatively complex movements that can help speed you up, as well as avoid fire, as well as get you out of a lot of troublesome situations. So these provide the basic movements for the game, and why I call them basic movements is now you could actually combine them to make even more complex movements in the game. And the first combination movement is a double jump. And as the name implies, it's basically a jump and then a jump. So if it's in the PC, then you would press space, and then right after, immediately after, you will press another space, and that will actually give you a longer jump or a higher jump than you would usually have with just a single jump. Now you often see this in a lot of parkour type games, but of course Warframe, giving you equal movement as most any parkour game, will also give you that sort of capability. Now the next combination move is one that you probably won't see in most any other game, even the parkour games, but it becomes one of the most crucial moves that you have, and that is the bullet jump. And the bullet jump is a very interesting jump. It looks very strange in the beginning, but you later find out how important it is, because it is one of the most useful and maneuverable moves that you have in your jump arsenal. And the bullet jump comes when you actually do a slide and a jump at the same time. So if you're in a PC, that will be the control and the space bar at the same time. Now for the PS4 and the Xbox One, once again, I don't know what the corresponding buttons are, but if you do know what the buttons for slide are, as well as for jump, then doing those together, I would presume, will give you the bullet jump. And that's one of the reasons why I say learn all your basic movements, because they become crucial when you're trying to do these combination movements. Now, one of the most important things with the bullet jump is you do have to get the timing right. If you do it wrong and your slide comes slightly after the jump, then what you end up with is a jump slide, which is like a jump kick. And you don't want to end up that way. And so if you're having some trouble doing the bullet jump, then one thing you could do is to first do a slide, and then right at the end of the slide you do a jump. And then what you'll see is at the end of the slide you will do the bullet jump if you tap the space bar. And then you keep on reducing the time between the slide and then the jump until eventually you'll be able to do the bullet jump all by itself, and just be able to do it continuously, one right after another. Right the moment you land, you do another bullet jump, and once you get to that level, then you should be comfortable doing this move. And once you master both the bullet jump and the double jump, then you could combine them to get some very decent distance in your travels. So of course you do the bullet jump first, and at the very end you tap space again and you get a double jump at the very finishing of the jump. And that will get you covering some serious distance just from the basic combo moves that we have seen here. So yeah, if you can get this down right, whoops, sorry about that. If you could get this down right, then you actually can move relatively smoothly while traveling some very large distances. And at that time, then you could start staying up with a lot of the veteran players who have played this game for quite a while, because you can do these parkour moves that travel extremely long distances. Now the next combo move is the move that you might accidentally do if you do a bullet jump, and that's a jump slide. And the jump slide is similar in the command to a bullet jump, except it's backwards, so instead of a slide and jump, you do a jump and slide. And though this movement is relatively simple in looks, it actually turns out to be quite useful. The first use, of course, keeping your continuity in your movements. By jumping and then sliding and then jumping again, you often have a chance of keeping your momentum going while you're actually going in your forward movement. However, the more important and more useful role is that it can also be used as a jump kick. And the jump kick turns out to be quite useful every once in a while. Aside from, of course, your weapons and your melees, your entire body can turn out to be a weapon all by itself. And by propelling your body towards the enemy, you could actually send the enemy flying just by doing a jump and then a slide in its general direction. So this turns out to be quite the useful combo movement. Okay, so the next combo move is not technically a combo move in that it doesn't take two or more of your basic moves, combine them, and give you a different move. It actually will be one basic move after another, and that is the jump and then the landing roll. So as you can see here, you jump and then you roll. You jump and then you roll. And it may sound relatively elementary and straightforward and maybe not all that exciting, but it's actually one of the more crucial moves you have in the game, because there are times when you will break your momentum due to suddenly having to stop in a certain direction. The roll actually will keep you going and keep the momentum going so that you could actually move faster or continue to move faster. And so whether you're jumping and you're rolling, you're bullet jumping and you're rolling, or you're falling and you're rolling, the jump and roll turns out to be very useful. And this usefulness becomes extremely noticeable when you're doing a fall from a high ledge, as everybody has done in the past. And what the roll does is it basically keeps your movement going so that you don't end up going into a pause that can potentially become lethal in your gameplay. So for anyone who started playing Warframe, they find out relatively early in the game that if you jump from a very high location to the ground, then you end up going into kind of a pause state while you regain your balance. And during that time, you become extremely vulnerable to being shot. However, now if you add a roll at the end of your fall, then you could keep the movement going without breaking the momentum, and thus becoming a lot less susceptible to getting hit. So this continuation of momentum after you land works for both the slide as well as the roll. And although the roll is a little bit faster, the slide works just as well. You do have to time it a little bit better, but either way it works. And in fact, if you do a slide and immediately go to something like a bullet jump, you could continuously keep your momentum going really high. So once again, let's see if we do this again. So you go to a very high area, and instead of just dropping down, you basically jump down and then you go into a slide and then you immediately do a bullet jump. And then as you can see, you actually don't lose any sense of momentum at all. So now, though rolling or sliding after falling is extremely useful, it's not the easiest thing to practice just going out into a mission, and that's why a jump slide or a jump and landing roll turns out to be really useful, because you could do that most anywhere, and once you get used to it, you'll find out that even when you jump from a high location, you'll immediately instinctively start rolling or sliding just to keep the momentum going. So it's very useful to actually practice both the jump slide as well as the jump roll to start getting used to actually landing without actually stopping. And so this brings us to our last of the basic combo movements, and that's the bullet jump, double jump, aim glide. And have you ever been in a mission where you're running with a lot of veteran players and you get to a point where you're like at a cliff and they just jump outrageous distances and you're like, whoa, how the heck did they do that? And you try jumping that distance and you fall right into the cliff, right down the cliff. And that's because of the aim glide. The aim glide gives you the ability to travel really long distances. And when you combine it with the bullet jump and the double jump, you can cross some serious distance, as you can see here. So the aim glide on the PC is done by clicking on the right mouse button while you're flying. So if you're going to do a bullet jump and a double jump, then of course you do the control space and then the space, and while you're flying you click now on the right mouse button and you'll extend that flight using the aim glide. So these are some of the basic parkour movements that can help you start getting used to becoming more mobile in the game, as well as becoming more faster when regards to traveling amongst your fellow Tennos. Now, aside from these basic jumping movements, there are a couple of other movements that are quite noteworthy, and they are the wall latch, the wall movement, and what you might call the coptering, or the slide attack, slide melee attack. And so we'll go over those as well relatively quickly. Okay, so starting with wall movements, you already know this from the very first mission that you've done because actually it gave it in the tutorial. But this turns out to be actually a very useful movement in terms of things like going through spy missions and of course moving against the wall. And if you ever do PvP, this turns out to be quite useful. I'm not very good at it, and wow, I got stuck here. Let me just move. There we go. But yeah, practicing by continuously moving along the wall turns out to be actually quite useful for overall movement. And then there's the wall latch, which basically is the famous Spider-Man move that makes you stick onto the wall. And for this one, the best thing to do is to just continuously practice going from one wall to another without trying to touch the ground. And so this isn't always easy because you have to get the timing right, or else you end up doing an aim glide instead of a wall latch. But if you continue to practice it, this can turn out to be quite useful. And then there's the slide attack, which basically is sliding while you swing your melee weapon. And it doesn't sound like all that much, but I bring it in here for somewhat nostalgic purposes. And this used to be called coptering, or nicknamed coptering, as you can see, because of the fact that you kind of rotate around and swing your weapon in a circular manner like a helicopter. And why I say it's a nostalgic event is because of the fact that in the old days, this is how you used to propel yourself very quickly. This was before bullet jumps and the new parkour method came. And in the old days, when you actually spun your weapon like a helicopter, it would actually move you and propel you forward at a very fast speed. And what was interesting is when Digital Extremes got rid of coptering, people got really upset. But it was right at the time when they introduced the new parkour method. And of course, people were upset until the point when they realized just how good bullet jumps were. And then coptering was kind of forgotten. Now, I kind of put it in here for two reasons. One, of course, is the nostalgia. But the other is because of the fact that it actually can be quite useful in melee sort of battle. So if you go out into the area, if you have a large number of enemy in one location, then coptering turns out to be pretty good because you're wildly swinging your melee weapon around so much that you could take out a good number of the enemy all at once. So I did put this in here for another parkour move, mostly because of the nostalgia and the somewhat beneficial advantage of being able to do slide attacks. And the one final question, of course, is where do you practice all of this? Well, you could do it most anywhere, including all of those missions or even in the relay station. But if you don't want to do that out in the public, then one place that you can do it is actually in these new Captura locations. So although there are a lot of locked areas, and I don't have any extra Captura areas, you do get 3 defaults. And the ones that I've been showing in this video is for the Corpus one, but you could use any of them. And the nice thing about this is you basically can do it like any other mission. You get all the movements, you get all the weapon capabilities, and the nice thing is you could even spawn enemies in here, so you could try parkouring against your enemy. And the greatest thing about this is that you have God mode. You don't actually get killed in the Captura mode, so you could do whatever you want, spawn as much enemies, up to 3 anyway, that's all Captura will do, but you could spawn whatever enemies you have and then just play around. Or you could just, like me here, just bounce around like crazy and start practicing whatever you want. Whether it's those movements that I talked about or even any other movements that you see in the other videos or while you're playing the game. And so yeah, Captura turns out to be actually a very useful area for training for parkour. Okay, well that's about it for this video. Thank you very much for watching it. For the new players out there, I hope this turned out to be somewhat useful. And just one last final note, keep doing parkouring. There's nothing wrong. You don't really end up dying ever from parkouring wrong. This is one of those games, unlike other parkour games, where you don't die falling from a large height. And you really can't go wrong with parkouring. So yeah, go out there and try everything out and see how things go. And if you keep on working at it, you'll get better, and eventually after a little while you'll become a lot better parkour player than I am, but that doesn't really say much. Okay, anyway, so it's been a pleasure making this video for you. If you have any comments, please post them in the comments section below. And we'll continue to make more Warframe videos in the future, and I hope you join us in our future Warframe adventure. And until the next episode, we wish you all the best. And as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.